I administered my colleague's EpiPen during an allergic reaction, and now I'm being charged with assault with a deadly weapon. The detective read me my rights at my desk at 2:47 on a Wednesday afternoon while my entire department watched through the glass walls of my office. Daniel Reeves, you're under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon and reckless endangerment. My hands were still typing an email when he said it. I looked up at Detective Lawrence Kimball standing over me with another officer behind him, both wearing expressions that suggested I was something dangerous they'd finally cornered. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Kimball pulled out handcuffs. "You administered epinephrine to Allison Porter without medical authorization on September 14th. She's filed criminal charges. You need to come with us." My stomach dropped. September 14th was 3 weeks ago. The day Allison collapsed during the company luncheon, her throat swelling shut, her face turning purple. The day I'd grabbed her EpiPen from her purse and injected it into her thigh because she couldn't breathe and was dying in front of 30 people. The day I'd saved her life. Now she was saying I'd assaulted her with a deadly weapon. Kimball wasn't interested in explanations. He cuffed me at my desk while my coworkers stared. My boss, Philip Grantham, stepped out of his office looking confused and horrified. "Daniel, what's happening?" I told him I didn't know, that this was a mistake. Kimball led me through the office in handcuffs past people I'd worked with for 6 years. Rachel from accounting had her hand over her mouth. Thomas from IT was filming on his phone. By the time we reached the elevator, I could hear whispers spreading like fire through dried grass. The police station was cold and fluorescent and smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. They processed me like I was a criminal. Fingerprints and mugshots and a holding cell where I sat for 4 hours before anyone told me what was actually happening. When they finally brought me to an interrogation room, Kimball sat across from me with a file folder. "Allison Porter claims you attacked her during a company event, stabbed her in the leg with a needle containing a substance you knew she was allergic to. She's provided medical documentation showing the injection caused cardiac complications requiring hospitalization. She's also provided witness statements confirming you grabbed her and held her down while injecting her against her will." I felt my face go hot. That's completely insane. Allison has a severe shellfish allergy. Someone served shrimp at the luncheon and she went into anaphylactic shock. I used her own EpiPen to save her life. She couldn't breathe. She was turning blue. There were 30 witnesses who saw the whole thing. Kimball opened the folder and slid a document across the table. It was a sworn statement from Allison claiming I'd deliberately caused her allergic reaction by forcing her to eat shrimp, then injected her with epinephrine knowing she had a heart condition that made the medication dangerous. She stated I'd acted with malicious intent, that she'd told me repeatedly to stop, that I'd ignored her protests and assaulted her. The statement was notarized and signed in her careful handwriting. I read it twice, unable to process what I was seeing. This is completely false. Every single word. Why would she lie about this? Kimball leaned back in his chair. "You tell me. Why would a woman accuse someone of assault if it didn't happen?" I told him I had no idea, but the truth was documented by dozens of people. Kimball said witnesses could be unreliable and that Allison's medical records showed she'd suffered cardiac complications from the epinephrine injection. They held me for 18 hours before setting bail at $50,000. My brother posted it at 9 the next morning and drove me home in silence. Justin didn't ask questions until we were, inside my apartment. Then he turned to me with his arms crossed. "What the hell actually happened, Daniel?" I told him everything. The company luncheon at the Riverside Hotel ballroom celebrating the successful launch of our new software platform. Catered lunch with a seafood option nobody had flagged as containing shellfish. Allison taking a bite of what she thought was chicken, then grabbing her throat 30 seconds later. Her eyes going wide with panic. Her lips swelling, her voice coming out in a rasp saying she couldn't breathe. Me recognizing anaphylaxis from first aid training. Me asking if she had an EpiPen. Her nodding and pointing to her purse on the table. Me finding the EpiPen and reading the instructions quickly while someone called 911. Me pulling off the safety cap and jamming the device into her thigh through her skirt exactly as the instructions showed. The click and hiss of the injection. Allison gasping and her throat opening enough to pull in air. The paramedics, arriving 6 minutes later and taking over. Allison being rushed to the hospital. Everyone thanking me for acting fast. Philip telling me I'd saved her life. Justin listened with growing disbelief. So you did exactly what you were supposed to do, and now she's saying you assaulted her? I showed him the police report and criminal complaint. Justin read through it, his expression darkening. This is prosecutorial malpractice. No DA in their right mind would bring these charges. But the charges were real, and I had an arraignment scheduled for Monday morning. I spent the weekend researching criminal defense attorneys and trying to understand what was happening. Allison Porter was 31 years old, married, worked in our marketing department for 3 years. We weren't friends, but we were friendly. We'd been on project teams together. We'd had coffee a few times discussing campaign strategies. She'd always seemed professional and pleasant. I'd met her husband once at a company holiday party. He was older, maybe 45, worked in pharmaceutical sales. His name was Derek Porter, and he'd spent the entire party talking about his sales numbers and how much money he made. Allison had been quiet that night, almost withdrawn. I'd assumed she was tired or bored. Now I wondered if there was more to it. I found a criminal defense attorney named Victor Huang, who specialized in false accusation cases. His website showed a long list of clients he'd successfully defended against wrongful charges. I called his emergency number Sunday night. Huang listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. This is either a genuine misunderstanding about what happened, or someone is deliberately manipulating Ms. Porter. The charges are absurd on their face, but that doesn't mean they won't cause you serious problems. Criminal charges for assault with a deadly weapon carry a potential sentence of 5 to 15 years. Even if we get them dismissed, the arrest record will follow you forever. My mouth went dry. What do I do? Huang said to hire him immediately and prepare for a fight. His retainer was $25,000. I agreed without hesitation and wired the money that night from my savings account. Monday morning, Huang met me at the courthouse. He was in his mid-40s, sharp-suited, with an intense focus that made me feel slightly less terrified. The arraignment lasted 10 minutes. The prosecutor, a stern woman named Catherine Volkoff, read the charges and requested high bail, citing the violent nature of the alleged assault. Huang argued I was a non-violent first-time defendant, with strong community ties and no flight risk. The judge set bail at $100,000 and scheduled a preliminary hearing for 3 weeks out. Huang told me afterward that Volkoff was known for being aggressive, but fair. She won't pursue a case without evidence. The question is what evidence they think they have, beyond Allison's statement. I asked what our next steps were. Huang pulled out a legal pad. We need to interview every witness from that luncheon. We need the catering company's records showing what was served. We need the 911 call recording. We need Allison's complete medical records from the hospital. We need documentation of your first aid training. And we need to understand why Allison is making these accusations. He looked at me directly. Is there any history between you two? Any rejected advances, any arguments, any reason she might want to harm you? I shook my head. Nothing. We had a completely normal professional relationship. Huang made notes. Then someone is pressuring her, or there's a motive we haven't identified yet. People don't file false criminal charges without a reason. That afternoon, my company placed me on immediate unpaid administrative leave, pending the outcome of the criminal case. Philip called me personally to deliver the news. His voice was apologetic, but firm. Daniel, I believe you acted heroically that day. Everyone at the luncheon saw what happened. But with criminal charges filed, the company can't keep you on staff. It's a liability issue. I'm sorry. I wanted to argue, but understood his position. My career in software development, 6 years of building client relationships and managing projects, was suspended indefinitely because of accusations I knew were lies. Huang worked fast. Within a week, he'd obtained the 911 call recording from the luncheon. The dispatcher's voice was calm and professional, asking what the emergency was. A woman's voice, someone from our office, said there was a medical emergency, that a colleague was having an allergic reaction and couldn't breathe. The dispatcher asked if anyone was providing first aid. The woman said yes, that someone was administering an EpiPen. The dispatcher said to continue monitoring the victim and that paramedics were 4 minutes away. Huang also obtained statements from 6 witnesses who'd been sitting at Allison's table during the luncheon. All 6 confirmed the same sequence of events. Allison ate something from the buffet. She started having trouble breathing. She grabbed her throat and looked panicked. I'd approached and asked if she was okay. She'd shaken her head and pointed to her purse. I'd found the EpiPen and administered it. She'd started breathing again. Paramedics arrived shortly after. Not one witness mentioned Allison protesting or me acting aggressively. Huang filed these statements with the court and requested dismissal of charges based on overwhelming evidence that I'd acted appropriately during a medical emergency. Volkov's office responded with their own evidence. They had medical records from St. Catherine's Hospital showing Allison had been admitted for cardiac arrhythmia following the epinephrine injection. The attending physician's notes stated that epinephrine can cause dangerous cardiac complications in patients with underlying heart conditions. They had a statement from Allison's cardiologist, Dr. Raymond Voss, confirming Allison had a previously undiagnosed heart condition that made epinephrine administration risky. Volkov argued I'd acted recklessly by injecting a powerful medication without medical training or knowledge of Allison's full medical history. Huang read through the prosecution's evidence carefully. This is more sophisticated than I expected. They're not claiming you intended to harm her. They're claiming your actions were reckless and caused serious injury. That's a different legal standard and harder to defend against. He looked up at me. Did you know Allison had a heart condition? I told him I'd had no idea and that she'd never mentioned it. Huang nodded. That's our defense. You acted reasonably based on the information available. She was dying from anaphylaxis. EpiPens are designed for exactly that situation. The heart complications were an unfortunate consequence, but not a result of recklessness. He paused. But we need to understand why she's pursuing this. The cardiac issue alone doesn't explain criminal charges. There's something else driving this. He hired a private investigator named Monica Reyes to look into Allison and Derek Porter's background. Reyes was a former police detective with contacts throughout the city. She reported back 3 days later with preliminary findings. The Porters are drowning in debt. Derek's pharmaceutical sales job pays well, but they've leveraged themselves heavily. 2 mortgages on their house, maxed credit cards, a car loan they're behind on. Derek also has a gambling problem. There's evidence of regular casino visits and online betting accounts with significant losses. Huang leaned forward. How significant? Reyes checked her notes. Over 200,000 in the past 18 months. They're on the verge of bankruptcy. My mind started connecting pieces. So they're looking for money. If I'm convicted, they could sue me civilly for damages. Medical bills, pain and suffering, lost wages. Huang nodded slowly. That's one possibility. But criminal charges are an extreme way to set up a civil case. There might be something more direct. Reyes continued her investigation and discovered something crucial. Derek had taken out a substantial insurance policy on Allison 6 months earlier. $1 million accidental death and dismemberment policy with a clause covering disabilities caused by assault or violent crime. If Allison suffered permanent injury from a violent assault, Derek would receive a payout of $500,000. Huang stared at the policy documents. He's trying to cash in on an insurance policy by framing you for assault. I felt sick. But Allison didn't suffer permanent injury. She had cardiac complications but recovered fully. Reyes pulled out more medical records. According to her recent doctor's visits, she's claiming ongoing heart problems, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress from the assault. She's building a medical record to support a disability claim. Huang was already making notes. This is fraud. Derek manipulated Allison into filing false charges to collect insurance money. We can prove it if we can show she's not actually disabled and that Derek orchestrated the whole thing. He looked at me. But proving coercion will be difficult unless Allison admits it. The preliminary hearing was 2 days away. Huang filed an emergency motion to compel the insurance company to provide all communications regarding Allison's claim. The judge granted it. What we found was damning. Derek had contacted the insurance company 2 days after the luncheon incident, before Allison even filed criminal charges, asking about the process for claiming assault-related disability benefits. He'd specifically asked whether an EpiPen injection could be classified as assault with a deadly weapon. The insurance representative's email response explained that assault with a deadly weapon charges would indeed trigger the policy's assault clause if the victim suffered qualifying injuries. Huang brought this evidence to Volkov before the preliminary hearing. We met in her office downtown, a cramped space filled with case files and legal books. Volkov read through the insurance documents with increasing concern. This changes everything. If Derek Porter is manipulating these charges for financial gain, I can't in good conscience proceed with prosecution. She looked at me. But I need to hear from Allison directly. If she's being coerced, she deserves protection. If she's complicit in the fraud, that's a different matter. Huang suggested a deposition under oath where Allison would have to answer questions about Derek's involvement and the insurance policy. Volkov agreed and scheduled it for the next morning. That evening, Huang prepared me for what might happen. Allison will either admit Derek pressured her or she'll maintain the accusations. Either way, the insurance fraud evidence severely undermines the prosecution's case. But be prepared for her to dig in. People don't abandon false accusations easily, especially if they're scared of their partner. The deposition took place in a conference room at the courthouse. Allison arrived with Derek and a lawyer Derek had hired, a nervous-looking man named Stuart Finch who specialized in personal injury cases. Allison looked thin and exhausted. She wouldn't make eye contact with me. Volkov started the questioning, asking Allison to describe what happened at the luncheon. Allison's voice was barely above a whisper. I started having trouble breathing. Daniel came over and grabbed me. He forced me to stay still while he stabbed me with a needle. I tried to tell him to stop, but he wouldn't listen. Volkov asked if she'd shown Daniel her EpiPen or indicated she needed help. Allison hesitated. I don't remember clearly. Everything was confused. Volkov pressed further. Do you remember pointing to your purse where your EpiPen was kept? Allison's hands twisted in her lap. Maybe. I'm not sure. Volkov slid the 911 recording transcript across the table. The emergency call indicates someone was administering an EpiPen with approval. Does that match your memory? Allison looked at Derek. He gave a slight shake of his head. She turned back to Volkov. I don't think I approved it. I think he just did it. Huang jumped in. Ms. Porter, were you aware your husband contacted your insurance company about assault disability benefits 2 days after the incident, before you filed criminal charges? Allison's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Huang showed her the insurance emails. Your husband specifically asked if an EpiPen injection could qualify as assault with a deadly weapon for insurance purposes. Did you discuss this with him before filing charges against Mr. Reeves? Allison stared at the documents, her hands shaking. Derek leaned forward. Don't answer that. Stuart, object to this line of questioning. Finch stammered. I object. This is harassment. Volkov's voice cut through. Mr. Porter, this is a criminal deposition. You don't get to coach the witness. She looked at Allison. Did your husband encourage you to file criminal charges? Allison's eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Derek stood up. This deposition is over. Allison, we're leaving. Huang blocked the door. Sit down, Mr. Porter. Your wife is under oath, and leaving now would constitute obstruction. Derek's face turned red. Get out of my way or I'll move you myself. Volkov stood. Mr. Porter, if you threaten anyone in this room, I'll have you arrested immediately. Sit down. The tension in the room was suffocating. Derek slowly sat back down, his jaw clenched. Volkov turned back to Allison. Ms. Porter, I need you to tell me the truth. Did your husband pressure you to file these charges? Allison was crying now, tears running down her face. She looked at Derek, then at me, then at Volkov. When she spoke, her voice was broken. Derek said we needed the money. He said the insurance would pay if I claimed assault. He said Daniel hurt me with the injection, and that made it assault. He told me what to say in the statement. He said if I didn't do it, we'd lose the house, and it would be my fault, because I was the one who got sick. Derek shot to his feet. She doesn't know what she's saying. She's still traumatized from the assault. Allison turned to him with sudden fury. Stop it, Derek. Just stop. I can't do this anymore. She looked at Volkov. Daniel saved my life. I was dying and he helped me. Derek made me lie because he gambled away all our money and thought the insurance would fix everything. He wrote the statement for me. He told me exactly what to say to the police. He threatened to leave me if I didn't go along with it. He said it was my fault we were broke, because my medical costs after the hospital were too high. The room went silent. Volkov's expression was cold steel. "Mr. Porter, you're under arrest for insurance fraud, criminal coercion, and filing a false police report." She signaled to the bailiff standing by the door. Derek tried to run, but the bailiff grabbed him. He was cuffed and removed from the room while Finch sat frozen, realizing his client had just implicated him in fraud. Volkov looked at me. "Mr. Reeves, all charges against you are dismissed immediately. I apologize for what you've been put through." The aftermath moved quickly. Derek was charged with multiple felonies. The insurance company launched their own investigation and found evidence Derek had researched insurance fraud extensively before the luncheon incident. His browser history showed searches for how to fake assault charges, EpiPen as deadly weapon, and collecting insurance from assault claim. Prosecutors discovered he'd even researched what foods contained shellfish and had specifically requested a seafood option be added to the luncheon menu, knowing Allison was severely allergic. He'd planned the entire scenario. The original intent wasn't just insurance fraud. Derek had hoped Allison's allergic reaction would be severe enough to cause permanent complications that would trigger an even larger payout. When she recovered quickly, thanks to my intervention, he'd pivoted to framing me for assault to salvage the insurance claim. Allison filed for divorce and cooperated fully with prosecutors. She gave detailed testimony about Derek's financial abuse, his gambling addiction, his threats and manipulation. She explained how he'd isolated her from friends and family over the years, controlled all their finances, and blamed her for their debt. The EpiPen accusation was just the final step in years of psychological abuse. Derek's trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence against him was overwhelming. He was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 8 years in prison. The insurance company sued him for attempted fraud. His assets were seized to pay legal judgments. Allison testified at sentencing, describing the terror of living with someone who'd literally tried to profit from her near death. The judge showed no mercy. My charges were formally dismissed with prejudice and expunged from my record. The court issued a public statement acknowledging I'd acted heroically during a medical emergency. Philip called me a week after Derek's conviction. "Daniel, I owe you an apology. The company acted too quickly in suspending you. We should have trusted your character and waited for the facts. Your position is waiting for you whenever you're ready to return." I told him I appreciated the offer but needed time. The past months had taken a toll. Philip understood. He mentioned the company was implementing new policies about false accusation responses and had made a donation to an advocacy group for falsely accused individuals in my name. Huang helped me file a civil suit against Derek for defamation and malicious prosecution. The case was straightforward given his criminal conviction. The judgment was for $375,000 in damages. Derek would never pay it from prison, but having the judgment mattered more than the money. It was official recognition that I'd been wronged. Allison reached out to me 6 months after the trial. She asked if we could meet to talk. We met at a quiet cafe across town. She looked healthier, more present. She'd moved in with her sister and was working on rebuilding her life. "I don't expect forgiveness," she started. "What I did was unforgivable. You saved my life and I tried to destroy yours because I was too weak to stand up to Derek." I listened as she explained the full extent of Derek's control. The financial manipulation, the emotional abuse, the constant threats. How he'd convinced her over years that she was worthless without him, that every problem was her fault. How the insurance fraud scheme was presented as the solution to save their marriage, and refusing meant she was choosing to destroy their life together. "I know I made my own choices," Allison said. "Derek couldn't have forced me if I'd been stronger. But I want you to know I'm getting therapy. I'm learning how to recognize manipulation and set boundaries. I'm trying to become someone who would never do what I did." I thought about my own anger, my own pain from those months of accusations. I thought about how close I'd come to losing everything because of lies. But I also saw the person in front of me, someone who'd been victimized long before she became a victimizer. "I don't forgive you yet," I said honestly. "Maybe I will someday, but I appreciate you telling me the truth when it mattered. In that deposition, you chose honesty over self-preservation. That took courage." Allison nodded, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for saving my life. Both times. Once in the ballroom, and once by refusing to let Derek get away with it. We didn't become friends. We didn't stay in contact. But something was settled between us. I returned to work 2 months later. My colleagues welcomed me back with a mixture of relief and awkwardness. The glass walls of my office felt different now. Everyone knew what had happened. Everyone had watched me get arrested. The whispers never fully stopped. Rachel from accounting apologized for not speaking up sooner. Thomas from IT deleted his video and seemed genuinely ashamed. I threw myself into projects, rebuilt client relationships, proved my competence again. Philip promoted me to senior project manager the following year, partly as acknowledgement of what I'd endured. But the experience changed me fundamentally. I became hyper-aware of how quickly good intentions could be weaponized, how easily truth could be distorted, how vulnerable helpers were to accusations from the people they tried to save. I volunteered with an organization that provided legal support to people falsely accused of crimes. I shared my story at conferences about wrongful prosecution. I pushed for stronger protections for Good Samaritans and mandatory penalties for false accusers. The work gave meaning to what had happened. A year after Derek's conviction, I was at another company event, a summer barbecue at a local park. A colleague's child started choking on a hot dog. Parents panicked, screaming for help. I knew the Heimlich maneuver. I'd been trained. But I hesitated. For 5 seconds, that felt like hours. I stood frozen, thinking about Allison, about accusations, about how helping could destroy me. Then I moved. I performed the Heimlich. The child coughed up the obstruction and started breathing. Parents thanked me with tears of relief. Nothing bad happened afterward. No charges, no accusations, just gratitude. But those 5 seconds of hesitation haunted me. Derek had succeeded in making me doubt the simple act of helping another person. That was a different kind of damage, harder to quantify, impossible to sue for. Recovery isn't linear. Some days I was fine. Some days I saw an EpiPen in a first aid kit and felt my chest tighten. Some days I wondered if other people looked at me differently, if they remembered the arrest, if they questioned what really happened despite the truth coming out. Therapy helped. Time helped. But certain scars don't fully fade. Derek served 4 years before being released on parole. I never saw him again. Allison rebuilt her life slowly, remarried eventually, moved to a different state. She sent me a card when she heard about my promotion. Just 2 words, "Thank you." I didn't respond, but I kept the card. 3 years after the arrest, new legislation passed in our state strengthening Good Samaritan protections and creating criminal penalties for filing false emergency-related assault charges. The law was nicknamed Reeves Law by the advocacy groups that pushed for it. I testified before the state legislature during the hearings, told my story to rooms full of politicians and lawyers and journalists, watched it become something larger than my personal experience, a symbol of systemic failure and the need for reform. The law passed unanimously. I stood in the gallery when the governor signed it. Philip was there. My brother Justin was there. Huang was there. We went to dinner afterward and celebrated quietly. The law wouldn't undo what happened to me, but it might protect someone else. That mattered. I still work in software development, still manage projects, still attend company events. Last month, there was a luncheon celebrating a new product launch. The catering company carefully labeled every dish with allergen information. Multiple people had EpiPens visible on the table. Nobody had anaphylaxis. When I left that night, I felt something close to peace. Not because I'd forgotten what happened or because everything was resolved, but because I'd survived it and used that survival for something meaningful. Derek took 9 months of my life, thousands of dollars, my sense of safety in helping others. But he didn't take everything. I'm still here. I still help when I can. I still believe the world needs people willing to act when others are in danger, despite the risks. That's the decision I make every day, to not let Derek's manipulation win by making me too afraid to be the person I want to be. Some victories are quieter than courtroom vindications. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.